This video is going to be a different subject matter and different approach than I've been doing in recent videos. This is going to cover an action figure line called Hive World that was meant to be something that was proposed for Hasbro in the late 90s, 1999. It's something I worked on that I remained possession of for the last 25 years. I had basically found it in a box moving through things in recent months, and I wanted to do a video covering the development of this because it went unproduced like many action figure lines do. And the basic gist of it was a line of figures that were meant to be similar to Micronauts in terms of scale and functionality. The overview is that there were good guys, there were bad guys. The good guys were falcon-like warriors, the bad guys were insect-like warriors. It was meant to focus on not only posability and interchangeable aspects, but also to have a feature in it that was tied to magnetics. So the figures were meant to have magnetic components in their hands and feet and backs and chests for weapons and that sort of thing. It also was going to add additional vehicles for the figures themselves. You can see here, these were the Talon vehicles, and then the sectoid vehicles that were meant to have features that were tied into the magnetics and that sort of thing. And it was meant to be the 4-inch range, and I'm going to go through the process of how that stuff was done, and to cover it in a sense that this was before computers were used in the product development department I was working in. It was a satellite hub studio that worked for many toy companies. And for something like this shows some of the early concept sketches I did. Because computers weren't used, I would draw them out in pencil, and then I would photocopy the images and then render marker over top of them. I would then cut them out with an X-Acto knife and put them on paper that already had the sort of specifics written out, and arrange the shape in that way. So this covers the basic 4 characters that were for the heroes. There's your standard warrior, there's a leader, there was a female assassin, and sort of like a heavier guardian that make up the base list of the hero characters. And also this goes to show some of the vehicles. There was obvious influence for me in terms of like Batman, and Silverhawks, Micronauts. A lot of those things came into play. Even when it came to doing something like this transport ship, like I had the Flash Gordon stuff growing up, so that definitely came into my influences, and the Silverhawks and Batman stuff, especially with the vehicles themselves. This was a larger heroic transport ship that had magnetic features as well. For the bad guys themselves, they were devourers or sectoid devourers. I wanted the drones themselves, the warriors, to be really spiny and sort of spindly in that sense, and these are the heavier guardians. I wanted them to be much more bulky and robust and beetle-like in that regard, and to be able to change a little bit of scale so that a character like this would be a little bit larger than your basic drone. And then there was a lord, as you can see here, that was designed for the devourer range, the sectoid guys, and there was also a queen that went into that range as well. And they were really fun to work on, and it was very much a blue sky situation of just like, it has to be sci-fi, it has to be heroic characters against evil characters. You're free to do what you wish in that way. And this was some of the ship design that I did, this scout ship. And then also I worked on a crawler ship, and they all had really interesting features in that way. In terms of a lot of spring-loaded stuff, the magnetics tied to the figures and having them function on the ship's hulls. One of the bigger pieces that I did was this Hive ship playset that was designed, that was meant to be a carry case that opened up. It had magnetic components that worked with the outside, as well as pods you could store figures, and you could open it up and actually shoot foam projectiles out of this translucent tube that was made from a high density foam, similar to Nerf, but even tighter. And this shows the color stuff a little bit closer up. The goal I had with these hero characters was that they were going to be tied into metallics, warm colors, that sort of thing. The same goes with the vehicles. and really embraced like the vacuum metallizing at the time. And then in sharp contrast to the heroes, the villains were going to be like more natural tones, as you can see here, cooler tones like greens and blues, and then tie into translucent features as opposed to the metallics and the brightly colored tones. So their wings, their webs, that sort of thing would have been translucent material. And even when it came to moving on to the enemy ships, they would have had translucent wings as well, and clear translucent canopies and that sort of thing. So this next phase was me looking at how I would reapproach this now, if based on the length of time that has passed and the certain skills that I built over the last years, the last 25 actually, in modeling and sculpting and designing and using like texture-based programs and lighting, and how I would use those tools to reapproach re-envisioning this stuff. And that's what I've basically done, is taken each piece and done a new pass on how I would re-envision now approaching that, but also keeping in mind like the design that was there originally that I created, along with the notes that pertain to what the materials would be, what the colors would be, what the surfaces would be in the final form, and trying to respect that early design without trying to get modern, and keeping in mind that this was meant for children. It was not meant to be collectible. It was not meant to be, you know, just something that was designed for adults, but actually for kids to play with and interact with. So this goes through each of the heroes. This was one of the guys that, you know, I spent more time at sort of adjusting, because his original concept wasn't really that defined, where the others, like the Astrones and the other sectoids, they were very clearly defined. So me following the original designs that I'd done in a new form was very easy, because they were very clean and very distinct. And he was really fun to sort of like get the spininess and even the bulk and heft out of the dreadnought, and doing a pass there, and still retaining the original like flair and flavor of him, but also the colors, and getting the overall presence that I was looking for. So I'll go through each one of these, and it's interesting, like this character itself, he has a very goblin look in the end, which is very interesting, because it would have been something that I would design before like the Spider-Man movie, being that it was like 98. So, and really trying to embrace like the color palette that was in the original color renderings that were just done in marker, and trying to stay pretty closely adhering to that. And so, like, even with her, I tried to think about the fact that my original callouts had cloth wings as well, or cloth bits for a lot of the stuff that's worked better with movement. And the ships themselves, like, there are notes on this stuff that you can read, and like a lot of it was like spring-loaded firing mechanisms, cockpits that would pop out to hold figures inside. There were sensors on them that would allow this stuff to happen, and this one was one of my favorite ones, because the legs retracted and so did the wings, so it could go into a sub mode, which I thought would be really cool for play in that regard. And the Hive, which is coming up next, this was one of my favorite things to sort of try to figure out, and the fact that it had metal inserts so the figures could basically stick on the sides from their hands and their feet, and it had this claw feature that would snap out, and then you could grab other ships with, and that sort of thing. And the pod bays are to store figures in. This last group right here just shows me taking those final renders and then associating them with the early notes and representing that information in a much cleaner, like just more crisp, professional way with each of the Talons and then the sectoids. So just to sort of like take my original rough sketches and then present it in a clean way with clear, distinct notes was the goal behind this. So I appreciate you guys watching, and let me know what you think about Hive World, if it's something that you would have been interested in, and what you think.